Hi everyone, my name's Dan Raven-Ellison and I'm going to be your host for the Slow Ways webinar this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm just going to give it another sort of 2-3 minutes for anyone else to pile in and join us for this briefing. If you want to click on chat and share where you are, that'd be absolutely fantastic. We've got loads of people coming in from all over the country, which is absolutely brilliant. Hi Alison from Surrey. Hi Jamie from Nottingham. Please do click on chat and add your name in there. If during this webinar you want to ask any questions, please do so by using the Q&A function that you can see at the bottom of your screen. If you're tuning in via YouTube, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to add to the Q&A on the live Zoom itself. During the session, I'm not going to be responding to raised hands. It's very unlikely. And what I'd recommend is rather than asking lots of questions in the Q&A at the beginning of the talk, wait until I've gone through the majority of what I've got to say, and at the end, please put any questions in then, because I may well cover off some of what you want to ask. So thank you very much again for joining. Just going to see some of the names of people joining us. So we've got Joe from Dunblane, Neil in Bedfordshire, Harriet, it's going so quickly, Harriet in Essex, Maggie from Liverpool, hi. Sheila in Newcastle, welcome to you as well. So we've got 800 people on the Zoom so far, which is fantastic. Once we hit 1,000, unfortunately, anyone else has to join on YouTube, which is not the end of the world. Hi Wendy from Bath, good to see you. Bonjour, was it Martha from Scarborough? The name went so quickly I couldn't see that very easily. Teresa from Teesside, hi, welcome. Great. Okay, I'm just going to give it another minute and then we'll get going. Hi, Julie in the New Forest, Anne in Stratford-upon-Avon, Steve in Slough, hi. Charlotte in Cornwall, hello. Chris, good to have you. That's 845 people, absolutely brilliant. Keith, hi, hi Keith. Good to have you with us, Keith Halfacre, one of the sort of very first slow way makers, absolutely brilliant. Hi, Francis in Northumberland, Cliff in Bexhill on the Sea. Hi, Cliff. I think you're the artist, Cliff, aren't you? Fantastic artist. Thanks for joining us. Sarah from Poole. Hi, welcome. Okay, it's 3 minutes past. I'm going to get going with some introductions and a small apology. And like I said before, if you've got any questions, as we head towards the end of the presentation, please sort of throw those in and I'll work through as many questions as I can after the sort of brief presentation. And any questions I can't answer in the session, we'll try and answer on the Q&A on the slowways.uk website as well. And I'm recording all this as well. So in the next couple of days, I'll send an email out with some key details from the webinar, as well as a link to this video. So if I'm speaking too quickly, like I do sometimes, or you didn't quite catch something or want to share it with someone else, then you'll have access to that there. So thank you very much for your interest in slow ways. My name is Dan Raven-Ellison. I'm a geographer, a former geography teacher, a National Geographic explorer, and I started off the Slow Ways project right at the beginning of last year now. In this talk, I'm going to take you through the thinking behind the Slow Ways project, how the idea sort of came about and why I and we think that it's needed and necessary, take you through how the slow ways actually work, and then give you a bit of an insight into the way in which the website has been developed and the way in which that will work as well, and finish off with how you can get involved. And we need as many people to get involved in this project as possible, not just for a quick flash in the pan, but actually in a sustained way on into the future. I'm going to go through this talk about half an hour or so, and then there'll be more information at the end. Just to start with an apology though, that clearly we had hoped to launch Slow Ways, at the end of this month. If Slow Ways was a walking project that was about nice local circular walks in local communities, then we would have pushed ahead and launched at the end of the month. But the average slow way in England is about 12 kilometres. The average in Scotland is closer to 20 kilometres. There are hundreds that are just 5, 6, 7 kilometres, but there are large numbers that are quite substantial distances, and there are also linear routes. So while you can come back again, many of them, you end up in another town or city somewhere else. And so really the nature of slowways means that it's fantastic for so many reasons, as you'll see. But in terms of working with the government and be concerned about people's sort of health and well-being, that during this current lockdown, we just needed to sort of pause and wait until the environment, the conditions we're in get substantially better. So I'm going to dive in now and share my screen and take you through this presentation. Great. So slowways, which is an absolute pleasure to share with you. And just to say that during this talk, feel free to photograph the screen in front of you, screen grab it, whatever you want. Feel free to share any comments on your preferred social media channels using the hashtag slowways. So like I said, I'm a geographer, I'm an explorer. I absolutely love walking. Done a lot of walking. I've walked across all the national parks, all the cities in the UK, done lots of micro adventures around the country, done filming projects all about landscape and how we think about landscape. And when you do a lot of walking, like many of the people on this webinar will have done, many far more than I have, you begin to realize things that are good about walking in the country, but also things that could be far better as well. In many ways, this project is about celebrating those great things, but it's also about saying that we can actually make walking far better as well. And walking is important. I'm not going to teach anyone to suck eggs, but fundamentally, I think walking can improve our personal health, well-being, mental health. It can make us more creative, more productive. It can make us imaginative. It can help us to connect with ourselves, with others, with nature, with other places. It's so powerful on both an individual and societal level. And I think that if more people started walking more often, further, and for more purposes, then actually that would bring a great deal of benefits to ourselves and the country as a whole. So that's the spirit of this project. And I'm just going to take you through the thinking behind it. So when I think about walking in the UK, I think about a number of different things. But when I think about long distance routes, one of the first things I might think about, and many of you will be familiar with, are the national trails. These are strategic long distance paths of national assets that are absolutely fantastic to walk. They're important, they're beautiful, they're remarkable. But I think one challenge around them is that their length means that they can be very challenging for many people to complete. Also, the nature of where they are means that they can be technically quite challenging to complete because of how rural they can become. And then in their ruralness as well, just a very simple thing of booking somewhere to stay on a route can actually be inhibitive for many people because it's either too expensive or too hard to book into that accommodation. So I think these are absolutely fantastic routes that we should celebrate, absolutely brilliant, but in some ways are maybe not as accessible or as useful to some people as maybe they could be. Equally with our national cycle network, which is an inspired piece of work that is led by Sustrans, connecting up places, towns, cities, villages with cycle routes is a beautiful vision. Limitation, I think, in terms of coming from a walker's perspective, is that firstly the routes are predominantly designed for cyclists, but also they're predominantly on road as well. So here you can see all the purple routes, most routes on route. So absolutely brilliant, but maybe fall short slightly in terms of walkers. And then this image here, which I've sort of created a GIF of, showing you the Long Distance Walkers Association website. If you've not heard of the Long Distance Walkers Association before, I truly recommend checking them out. They've got massive catalogues and ways of searching for incredible long distance routes, like all these that I found that are spanning out from the southeast of England. And these long distance routes make up a significant chunk of about 200,000 kilometers of public rights of way that we have in the country, and start to help people make sense of how they might make longer journeys using these. But when I look at this particular map, I guess I have sort of two key reflections. Firstly, that to some extent it kind of looks like a big pile of spaghetti on a plate. It's all sort of quite confusing for a layperson to make sense of, I think. But as well as that, many of the names that are given to the paths are historic names, which I think can be slightly elusive. So many of us will know that the Pilgrim's Way and the Monarch's Way and various places connect up significant cities and are a way to get around the country. But I think that the nature of the naming and the nature of the signing means that actually, if you haven't got your GCSE in geography, or you've not done your D of E sort of like award, then maybe it could be a bit complicated sometimes to make sense of the mapping that's out there. So I think we can maybe do a bit better on that. And also when I look at this, I think, I think that with our roads, we expect to have roads named and signed in ways that make it easy to get around. But for some reason, when it comes to our footpaths, that's not the case. You can imagine if you were driving from, I don't know, Birmingham to Glasgow or something, if there were signs where there were just arrows pointing off in random places, not telling you where you were going, then you might not find that so useful. But actually, when you go walking in the countryside, quite often that's what there is, right? There's just a random arrow pointing off in a random direction, not telling you where it's headed, which I don't think is so useful for people. Anyway, a slight tangent. And then another set of mapping that I think, again, is inspiring, but maybe sort of twists our geographic imaginations of how people are getting around. We've got OS Maps. OS Maps have been absolutely fantastic collaborator on the Slowways project so far. But on this map, what they've done is they've mapped where most routes have been plotted in Great Britain. And so the places that are darkest purple are where most routes have been created using the OS Online Maps platform. And so it gives you the illusion that the place where most people are walking are in our national parks and our areas of outstanding natural beauty. You can maybe see the Lake District there, or the Peak District in the darkest purple in the north of England. But when we look at Strava heat mapping to show where most people are actually walking and actually running, it's really actually in our towns and cities. And that's because that's where most people are. It's because it's where most people want to go to or come from, but it's also because our urban areas are often far more inclusive and accessible environments, easier environments for people to move around. So with all that in mind, thinking about the fact that, we've got 200,000 kilometers of public rights of way that to some extent are disorganized, to some extent maybe we've forgotten the origins of why it is that we had those routes in the first place, that we do have elements of cycling networks in the country, but not necessarily in the same way, in a formalized way for walking networks, and thinking about where most people are and where most people might want to get to. I started thinking about the country and got thinking about the primary destinations and primary locations that both Ordnance Survey and the Department for Transport map out. And in both cases, they're mapped out in a way that is cartographically pleasing to people, but also strategically helps to make sense of how people are trying to move around the country. So in this case here, you can see all these primary destinations that I've mapped out here on Google Maps. And not only do they point out the most populated places, but also places that are important for cultural transport. So if you look down to Cornwall and the far southwest of Britain, or look up to the Highlands of Scotland, you'll see places that are mapped that are actually, excuse me, really quite small, but are really strategically important relative to that particular part of the country. So I got thinking about those and got thinking about the old maps that sailors used and maps that people used to start triangulate and start thinking about how they might navigate around the place. I started playing around with a simple principle, the principle that we should all be able to walk reasonably, safely, directly, easily, enjoyably between any two neighbouring settlements, right? And if we can't walk easily, directly, reasonably safely between two neighbouring settlements, I think something's probably going wrong. You can drive between any two neighbouring settlements. You should also be able to walk that journey as well. And playing with that principle, started imagining this sort of geometric network where these triangles begin to form, where to my human brain, if I look down in the west of Wales and I imagine how I might want to make a journey over to Norwich and East Anglia, I can very quickly begin to see how I might put together these sections of routes to make a journey like that. And so I started playing around with this idea very early on, just in a very rough way on Google Maps, thinking about how people might use this kind of network to walk to a neighbouring place, for fun, for enjoyment, for work maybe, to get home, whatever it might be. They might get the bus home or the train home again, or they might walk home again. But also how maybe people might set off on a Friday and go on a triangular walk, where on a Friday night and a Saturday night you stay in two different places and then return back to a train or bus station where you started off to finish your weekend. But the bit that excites me most about the Slowways network is thinking about these sort of longer distance journeys. Not everyone's going to be into these, but I think that Slowways will help people to imagine and plan these kind of longer distance journeys. At the moment, if you use just an algorithm on a typical website, then often it will not take you down the routes that other human beings would recommend that you pick. You know, it might use busy roads or paths that aren't particularly favorable. But what if each segment of this journey, several people before you had reviewed and verified it and said, yeah, this is a good way to go, given some recommendations so you can do that route. I think that would be extraordinarily powerful for people planning this kind of thing. As well as that, I think this approach opens up walking in a very interesting way, making it more inclusive. So when I was about the national trails before, I was describing that issue that sometimes when you're walking a long distance route that is one of the primary trails, you know, there might be competition to stay in a pub. The pub might be very expensive, might be hard to book, might be quite hard to organize. But by starting and stopping each night in a large village or a town or a city, it kind of remembers the origins of why footpaths are the distances apart they are in terms of trading between neighbouring places. And the fact that when you stop in a settlement, actually that means you have a range of places where you can stay, whether it's like a Premier Inn for 29 quid or a 5-star hotel, you can eat in Tesco, you can sleep on someone's sofa, whatever you want. But that greater diversity of options for where you stay, I think means that this kind of journey can be more affordable, more desirable as well compared to maybe other options. So while thinking about this, and February last year, organised a hack day at Ordnance Survey's Innovation Centre in central London called Geovation. We invited 70 people along to start playing around with how this idea might work in practice. And each of those people were given some rules to follow around connecting neighbouring settlements, asking them to create routes that as far as possible should do these following things. Now it's worth saying that depending on whether or not you're creating a route in the Highlands of Scotland compared to sort of downtown Manchester, all these different things I'm about to mention are relative and maybe sometimes not even possible, but it's about the desire to do these things as much as possible. So create routes that started and finished at good central points, so a train station, a bus station, a town square. Be direct as possible, off-road as possible, safe and accessible as possible, have resting places every 5 to 10 kilometers. And what we mean here in terms of resting places is that there's a post office or a pub or a hotel or a convenience shop, somewhere where you can eat or sleep for the night every 5 to 10 kilometers, something which is very possible for most of England, is very challenging for large chunks of Scotland. That wherever possible, pass through train and bus stations as well. And then these 7th and 8th points were important to the project, but not as important as the previous 6. So to be enjoyable and beautiful, and to not be tours, and if possible to use established routes like the Pilgrim's Way or the Thames Footpath or something, but not be distracted by them. So actually, across walking websites that provide routes to people, I would argue that what Slowways has that many of those other websites don't have is a common vision and purpose, with a common aim that everyone is working towards in terms of creating this network. There are many websites out there that provide the beautiful walks, the walks to go and see the trees or the church, or that use established routes. We're interested in a methodology that does 1 through 6 very well in terms of getting people around the place. But if we can make them enjoyable and beautiful and use Roman roads and everything else, then all the better. So just a bit of basics around the concept of what a slow way is, which may not at first be obvious to everybody. So a slow way is the concept that you should be able to walk between 2 neighbouring places. You should be able to travel easily directly between those two neighbouring places. But one of the key things that came out of the hack day was that it wasn't satisfactory to just allow there to be one single way of making that journey. Really good examples are someone might be a single parent pushing a pram who has triplets in their pram, and they want to really meet as few kissing gates as possible. And they might be willing to walk an extra kilometre or 2 to miss out 5 kissing gates. Or there might be someone who really doesn't want to walk alongside canals at night time, and so they'd rather go further but go through the lit route. Or maybe they were walking the Highlands of Scotland again, and rather than going over the peak, they'd rather go through the pass and take longer over that journey to sort of save their knees. These are all examples of why having multiple route options for any one slow way makes sense. What this also means is that the project is both forwards and backwards compatible to other projects which are about connecting neighbouring places, because actually we can offer up a range of ways to complete that particular journey. So I hope you'll realise as well here that in terms of accessibility, What this hopefully will mean is we can highlight the most accessible and inaccessible routes depending to particular user needs and to help them make judgments around that. And I'll return to that point in a moment. Just a bit of fun quirkiness for you. So the Salisbury to Winchester slowway, which doesn't actually exist, but for this example, it is here. The way in which we name the slowways is by taking the first 3 letters of the 2 places that are being connected. So in the case of Salisbury and Winchester, we take the Sol and the Win to create a route called Solwyn. And we have lots of lovely place names like Wimborne to Poole, I think is called Wimpoo, and Salisbury to King Solmesbourne is called Sulkin, and all these sort of poetic, sort of charming names, which is really great. But we always use the Western settlement for the first 3 letters and the last 3 letters as the Eastern settlement. So it's weirdly like a very broad way of navigating, although I'm not sure anyone would ever navigate like that. So the slowways themselves are not straight lines. They're wiggly, following these rules. And here you can see this route going from Sonning Common over to Henley-on-Thames as one segment. And then if people wanted to, they can get the train from Henley-on-Thames, stay the night, and if they wanted to, then continue on to Maidenhead. And you can see how Maidenhead's route really detours quite widely to avoid the A roads, to find the footpaths, to find places to stop and make that journey as direct but as enjoyable as possible. So the plan had been to organise several hack days around the country to complete the first draft of the network. But unfortunately, COVID came along, locked lots of us down, and I thought the project was going to stall. But a small team of volunteers who came to the original hack day, really persevering, creative, determined volunteers, helped put together an overview map for the country, get it all online, and literally just using Zoom and Google Sheets and Google Maps, put a call out. 700 volunteers came forward, and we started creating routes across the country just using these free tools. And these 700 volunteers were absolutely incredible in their imagination and perseverance with the project. But I think that for many of us who love walking and love maps, it was a perfect lockdown project for those of us who are stuck in our living rooms and our kitchens and wanted something creative and productive to do. So what people were using back in the very first lockdown was an overview map like this, which you can see is very similar to the map that I showed you at the very beginning, but it's far more detailed, connecting up 2,500 of the country's most populated and strategically important places. Not everywhere is included. This is an inter-town, inter-city network, rather than trying to do absolutely everything. And we think from estimates, and don't quote me on this, sort of without saying that I said to don't quote me on it, but we think that about 80% of the population in Great Britain live within a kilometre of a slowway, which is a really good coverage. This is what it looks like up in Scotland. And in practice, these triangles look something a bit more like this. So this shows you a bit of detail for what things look like in Herefordshire. And I hope you'll agree that you can see that not only how you might walk between those neighbouring places, but actually if you're on Hay-on-Wye and you wanted to get yourself over to Malvern or something, how you begin to connect things up for making that kind of journey. And how, when you look at a wider scale, here looking from Swansea over to Norwich, how actually there's a wide variety of ways in which you might choose to make a route based on your particular needs in terms of how far you want to walk or people you want to see or places where you might want to go. There's not necessarily just one good way to complete a journey like that. So an interesting thing that came with the project that is not a priority for us immediately, but I think is very interesting and wasn't sort of expected through the process, was some politics about the future of the slowways. So many of you may well have heard of Rambler's fantastic project that's led by Jack Cornish called Don't Lose Your Way, which is all about protecting ancient and historic footpaths to make sure that we continue to have them in the future. And actually, if legally they're not protected and recognised soon, then actually they might be lost. So do check out Don't Lose Your Way if you haven't heard of that particular campaign. That project is very much so looking at old paths that have been lost or unused and making sure that we keep them. What this map shows you is something very interesting about desires and hopes and possibilities for the future. So the straight lines you see here are the concept of the slowway, the principle that as the crow flies, you should be able to get between two neighbouring places. And then the wiggly lines show the reality of where people are really having to walk on the ground. So here now when we look at Cornwall, what you can see is the straight line, which is as the crow flies. the wiggly line showing the actual route people need to take. And then the shadow, the larger the shadow, is the greater the level of deviation that's necessary to complete that journey. And I would argue that using this methodology, we can come up with a list of the places where the level of deviation in proportion to the length of the route is wholly unacceptable. If in light of COVID and people not wanting to go on public transport, or climate change and wanting to reduce their carbon footprint, if people have to walk twice or three times as far, a third further, whatever it might be, to go and see their friends or go to a meeting or buy a paper or whatever it is they might be doing in the next village or town, if they're having to deviate so much, it stands to reason that they won't make that journey. And maybe what slow ways in this methodology might start to do is help to knock at the door of saying, well, actually, if we manage to cut off this dog leg, if we can have some permissive access here, if we had a new public right of way here, if we have a footpath alongside a road here, then actually we can start helping people to have healthier, greener, cleaner ways of moving around. And maybe the slow ways journeys might help to nurture some of that thinking. So this isn't a priority for the project at the moment, but I think it's just a very interesting aspect of something that's come of it. So just say this point as well, that our footpaths are a common good that we have been lucky enough and fortunate enough to inherit from our ancestors. We have common access to these common footpaths, and the essence of what we're developing with Slow Ways is to create a digital commons based on people's common good as well. So as we develop the Slow Ways project, we're working towards developing like a layer of routes which will be in the Creative Commons open data environment that anyone can take and innovate off. And the ambition being that every few months or every once in a while, we release a version of the network that people can innovate with, be creative with, whether they're artists or nature experts or whatever else, because we're using our common good, and that makes sense. As well as that, late last year, because of the success of Slow Ways, we've set up a community interest company, which is limited by guarantee. It's a not-for-profit company, which is there to also make sure that Slow Ways remains as a common good and is not exploited in a way that is not in the spirit of either our common land or that common good that I'm describing as well. So phase one of the project that I've described so far really was all about creating a first draft of the network and a provocation that would inspire people to get involved. And that provocation, that first draft looks like this, which I think looks absolutely beautiful. I apologise to Shetland for you being cut off slightly there. And actually the Isle of Man, the Isles of Scilly are on there now as well. But this first draft that was created consists of 7,000 routes that stretch for 100,000 kilometres, which is roughly the equivalent to 2.5 times around the equator. It was predominantly done within a single month, and about a year's worth of time was invested by those 700 volunteers during that core month, which I think is absolutely remarkable and certainly a silver lining maybe of this sort of awful time that we're living through with COVID. Phase two of the project is to explore, to test, and to verify these routes, which is what I'm hoping that very large numbers of you will be inspired to get involved with, whether you want to walk 3 kilometers of a route, whether you want to walk a 60-kilometer route of which there's only a very small number, whether you want to segment and join up lots of routes on a long distance journey. It'd be absolutely fantastic to have your help. And while the next phase is about exploring and testing, you know, it's also thinking deep into the future about how we can make the Slow Ways part of our culture and tell the story of the Slow Ways, as well as our stories of being on the Slow Ways. So this explore and test phase has basically been enabled because after that initial setup time, we needed to pull in some resources and some funding to build a website to enable us to be able to work with lots of you and other people to review and survey and evaluate and share these routes that people are creating and will continue to create. So we reached out and got some COVID innovation funding from Sport England to help, from Paths from All, some funding particularly around, you know, there are lots of people who walk for 10, 20, 30 kilometers for recreation. Actually, can Slow Ways be used to get more people thinking about walking routes of a similar distance, but to see family or friends or for work or to get to a meeting or that kind of thing. So we're exploring that with them. Kestrel Men Trust helped us at the very beginning to help get things going. Without their help, we wouldn't be where we are now. The Pilgrim Trust are particularly interested in us reaching people who maybe don't walk so often and those who need it most. And then we've had a range of help from Ordnance Survey, Esri and Costain as well with the geographic information part of the project. So that's all been crucial in order to build a website. And these pages just give you an indicative idea of how that website is going to work. I'm not going to zoom into these in detail. And as well as that, these are just mocked up wireframes. Some of the place names are wrong. The designer's just been playing around with how they'd work and how they'd structure. They're not the actual website at all. The actual website looks far more beautiful than this, I'm happy to say. So essentially what you do is you come onto the website and select a route that you would like to walk, go and walk it, and then share how you get on. And some people will just share how they've got on by telling family and friends that they've enjoyed walking a route. Other people will share by maybe writing a story somewhere or writing some journalism. Other people will share by writing an Amazon style review, by giving the route some stars and telling people what they thought of it and how challenging it was. And then other people will share who actually want to go far deeper than all the other groups and do something far closer to a survey of the route, telling us how many kissing gates are there, how steep is the gradient, what grade should this route be from 1 through 7, with grades 1 and 2 being suitable for people with wheelchairs, right up through grade 7, which is through some of the most harsh environments. So people will be able to engage on the project on a wide range of deepening levels. But essentially, it's about going out and selecting, walking, and sharing a route. So, like I say, ignore some of the place names in this. I apologize for that. But it's about selecting a route you're interested in, seeing how long it is, seeing how challenging it might be, seeing how it compares to other routes for completing that particular journey, picking the one you might want to do, be able to see, for example, the route features that are there or other comments that other people have made, and then reporting back on that as well by either leaving a review or, like I say, if you want to go much deeper into the project with us, actually surveying a route, which actually means like measuring paths and stuff like that. And what we're aiming towards is having a completely verified network where we're able to say that if you wanted to get yourself from Falmouth up to Inverness, this is the best route for you to take, given the information that you've told us about you or what you're particularly looking for. And we're developing some sort of tools around what we call way lists, which are a bit like playlists on Spotify if you have Spotify. But essentially what it allows you to do is to build up different segments of journeys to make an overall journey that you want to make if you're planning somewhere more long distance. And this just shows you what that sort of way list page might look like, building up these segments for this sort of longer distance journey. So we are developing also a grading system. We're actually just finishing off some of the details around this at the moment. And essentially the grading system is going to be developed working on the experience from Paths for All and what they've developed. Although for slow ways, we're separating out distance from the nature of the path. And we're going to have additional grades over and above the Paths for All ones for walks which are in particularly challenging environments. But essentially what it means is you'll be able to very quickly look at a grade and understand whether or not that, coupled with the distance, whether or not you think that route might be for you. So the call to action when we launch, once we're through the current lockdown and it feels like things are safe enough, are to select a route you're interested in walking, either as an individual or as a group, go and walk it, and then share how you've got on, either orally or through story, or by using the review system on the website if you want to go deeper. And you can do that as individuals, groups, awards like the John Muir Award or Duke of Edinburgh's Award. Local authorities can get involved, but also you might want to get involved as a professional, or do it for like a sponsored challenge for a charity, something like that. And if you are signed up as a group, then it's good to know that you could all walk a route as a group in a COVID secure way. But another way of looking at this is you could try and check out and verify as many routes in your neighborhood or county as quickly as you can, but as well as you can. So I know, for example, there's a group forming in Herefordshire that would quite like Herefordshire to be the first county that have verified all their routes. So the project has been going from strength to strength over the last few months. We've had lots of coverage, which is probably how you've heard about the project. And so far, 70,000 people and over 700 groups have signed up, which is absolutely fantastic, absolutely fantastic. That, if everyone gets out there, will not only mean that it's lighter work, but crucially, you can imagine that the more people who are walking the routes and more people who are reviewing them, the better the information we can provide people, and the more likely it is that the routes will become established and part of our culture and part of our legacy as well. So this just shows where some of the groups are. So you do not have to be in a group to get involved in Slowways. You can get involved completely on your own. But this just shows 600 of the groups the last time I mapped this and where they are. So if you're watching this and actually you are based in the Highlands or Islands of Scotland, if you're in mid Wales, if you're down in Cornwall, if you're around King's Lynn in the north of Norfolk or around Lincolnshire, you can see some gaps there, and it'd be great for any individuals or groups to help to fill those gaps. So the aim when we launch is to see if we can collectively walk 100,000 kilometers of Slowways in a single week. That's the challenge. And although that's a fun challenge for when we launch, you know, this is a long-term, large-scale vision. We're in no rush at all. And like I say, the more we keep looking at routes and keep on improving them, the stronger the network will be and the more enjoyable it will be. But when we do launch, 3 things, you know, for doing now or then, please do make some time during that launch week, and we'll let you know well in advance when that will be so you can prepare. Please do spread the word about Slowways. The more people who are signed up, the better. But also, if you can, if you're interested, if you are working in a council, if you have connections to your council, it'd be great if you could recruit the support of your council. Ledbury, Dartmouth, a few places have declared their support for Slowways. And on the Slowways website, you'll find a support tab, which has a standard form that you can send to councils that they can use to pass a motion in support. And that can be about them supporting getting more volunteers involved, about bringing Slowways into their policies for improving walking in the area. They might also want to think about piloting and using either mapping or signage in the longer term to make it easier for people to find their way around. So that's the Slowways project. I hope that you found that interesting and inspiring. Just to say a couple of key things while you put any questions into the Q&A, if you have any questions for me. One thing is that we're not going to be coordinating volunteer efforts from the centre. It's a large enough project that that we don't have the capacity to do that. But it's about people using the Slowways website when that's launched to identify routes that haven't been checked yet, routes that you'd be interested in doing, and going towards those, and not checking so much those routes which maybe lots of other people have checked before. Other thing that comes up a lot, which is important, is about Ireland and Northern Ireland. So the reason why we're focused to start with on Great Britain is because Ordnance Survey, our national mapping agency, covers Great Britain. It doesn't cover Northern Ireland. And when we collaborated with them, it has made sense to focus on Great Britain. But actually we have ambitions and are already looking at how we can expand things out for the island of Ireland. And based on the experiences and experimentation for Great Britain, actually it'll be far quicker to roll things out in Ireland once we get going there as well. So I hope that answers a couple of those questions. I'm just going to close my screen down and take some questions. The main presentation is over now. I'm still recording, so you can check back in later. But I'll work through as many questions as I can, and those I can't answer, we'll try and answer in the Q&A, like I said. So just working from the top, there are 31 questions. Ryan says, as someone relatively new to more long distance walking across country, are there good sites, forums, and or groups for being connected with other people, perhaps experienced walkers, for tips and route help? Yes, so like the website that I shared, I check out the Long Distance Walkers Association, who have all that kind of stuff to be very, very useful to you. Christopher says, are you catering for all walkers, blind, deaf, less able, etc.? So we are building in a review system which has the grading that I described, which follows the country. It's going to be very similar to the Countryside for All grading, which includes details for people who are blind and who require special assistance. And so grades 1 and 2 in that will be routes which will be like highly accessible. And then those grades, the limitation to the project, those grades will only be able to be done by people who have signed up to be a surveyor and have done some basic training to do that work. So what that means is that, to start with anyway, we're going to have a very large number of routes that will not have grades on them because of that lag between launching the project and having done the grading process. So the ambition is to get there, but it'll take a while. Also to say that we're focused on routes, not paths, which might sound like a silly difference. We're designing routes. We're not focused on fixing or maintaining or improving paths. There are other organisations, from local councils to ramblers, that are more interested in those topics. Christopher says, are you organising walks around towns and cities? Loads of the routes are through towns and cities, but we're not organising walks ourselves. People will do that independently. Think of slowways as a buffet that people can collaborate and innovate off. Malcolm says, is there any intended limit to the inaccessibleness of a route? So for example, any that may depend on scrambling. So if there are routes that go through very challenging places, then they'll be flagged up as grade 7 as being really challenging routes. And there will also be lists of features saying the particular problems that might be faced there. So tides or scrambling is necessary, whatever it may be. But then the ambition is that there then always be a second or third route option which would avoid those challenges. It's just likely to be that you might go a much further distance. So we don't want to exclude the people who want to do those more challenging things. And then we want to include people who might want to connect between those places, but they might just need to go slightly further to do it. Laurie says, Dan, have you considered using node numbering naming as they do in the Netherlands? Yes, we've considered that, and everything does have a code and a node, but the actual routes themselves have these sort of lovely names, and then every route also then has a particular route option name as well. But we're trying to avoid numbers a bit because it just feels a bit technical and suggests priorities and that kind of stuff. But everything does have a number, but not in the same way as the Netherlands. We're trying to be a bit more charming in our use of words. An anonymous attendee says, in recognising that access to green spaces isn't equal, will Slowways be working to encourage a diverse range of people to be involved? And hopefully, if so, how will you be doing that? Yes, we want the Slowways users to reflect the diversity of our country in terms of every facet of what diversity means. And we're currently developing a couple of projects particularly targeted at reaching maybe some of those people who are underrepresented currently in the countryside and on routes. And we're going to be finding other ways to do that as well. You're put down as anonymously, but if you want to contact me directly to find out more about that, please do. But suffice to say, that's a real priority for us. And actually a key part of our funding from Sport England is around that as well. And we're doing another thing we're doing around that, for example, is we've got a sounding board that's going to grow to, it's currently 7 people, it's going to grow to 10 people, who will also help us with that work as well. Stuart says, I gleaned you are possibly incorporating what 3 words. No problem with that, but are you also going to include tried and tested grid reference system, which is not reliant on electronics and signals? It's great questions. Those who don't know, what 3 words is a simple way of finding a particular location anywhere in the world based on 3 random words. And we're going to be using like longitude, latitude, grid references, and what 3 words, depending on when those different things are appropriate. What 3 words can be a very good tool sometimes, without a doubt. Christopher says, how do you intend to promote these Slowways routes? Well, there's been a lot of promotion in the media already, but to be honest, I'm really hoping that lots of people on this Zoom will be up for helping to promote it through your forums, through your networks, on social media, so that we can collaboratively, collectively make them a success. I think that power of word of mouth is a really big opportunity. Janine says, is there a way of classifying edges of these triangles beyond just distance, resulting in people being able to select routes based on their needs and interests? Choose a quiet route, happy route. Yes, so the answer is completely that people will be able to eventually sort and filter routes and prioritize them eventually based on facilities or needs or interests. Malcolm says, when will the first draft of the data be available? So the website will launch as soon as possible, as after the sort of lockdowns and whatever the tiers system is that we come out of, but we will give people a few weeks notice so that people can sort of prepare for that. Certainly some sort of degree of a notice period. All the routes will be downloadable individually, like straight away. We haven't decided yet when the first draft of the whole network will be available. That depends on how quickly it becomes verified. That might take weeks, or it might take months, or it might take years. We'll just have to wait and see how successful the project is. Anonymous attendee, how can Slowway's organisation link in with planning departments, housing departments, builders to influence the inclusion of proper infrastructure, pavements, walking safety, etc.? Many new housing estates are being built without considering the need to create these, plus upgrading poor existing pavements to accommodate the increase of people in the area. Some house building schemes are for over 200 houses, so loads more people out and about and poor existing facilities. So like I said before, we're focused on paths rather than routes, but I believe that by creating better routes and inspiring more people to get involved with asking for better routes, that will help to create some of the conditions and frustrations and knowledge that are necessary to help make it more likely that better paths are then put into the future as well. But at the moment, we're focused on routes rather than paths. Creating a network of nearly 8,000 routes for the whole country is already a big enough challenge as it is. So that's what we're going to focus on doing as well as we can. Chris says, how will you balance out where you have surplus or not enough volunteers to walk routes? You will be able to see to some extent on the website where people are reviewing and where people are commenting and the routes which no one has checked yet. That will be the way to do that. We're not centrally coordinating where people should go, when or how. It's far more organic than that. There may be like a small issue right at the very beginning of the project, which we don't think is significant enough to warrant heavy coordination. And then in the longer term, I think people will just self-organize. Jan, I love the project, but do wonder how you will handle livestock, which for me is the deterring factor. I do not know the territory, and of course is consistent sometimes, whether there or not. Also, mud is currently a major obstacle on many local paths. So the answer to that is that we are going to ask our surveyors to let us know which routes are cow-free and which routes are highly likely to have cows on them. And you'll be able to see from that which routes are likely to be cow-free, because I don't know, it's like an abandoned railway line or something that cows just don't go on. We also are going to have ways to indicate to you whether a route is highly likely to be muddy, and if so, if it's just a small section, or whether there's extensive mud. When a survey is done, we won't do it straight away, but when a survey is done, the surveyor will also be asked to write a description, and hopefully in that description it will give people a good idea, along with any photographs, of what the mud condition is like, so they can make a decision. You know, sometimes you have mud for 10 kilometers, but it's a hard surface, and actually, you know, in a wheelchair can go through quite easily. And other places you might have 10 meters, which is a complete quagmire and impossible for nearly anyone to get through unscathed. It's very hard for us to detail all those things in a quantitative way for this stage of the project, but we want to do it in a described way. Just to say at that point that we kind of realized a number of months ago that that an additional project is needed as a collaboration between a wide range of walking organizations, plus probably, you know, the respective governments of the nations, and then public rights of ways officers, councils, is a project specifically on barriers and features in the landscape. So we're focused on the lines and the routes and what's on those routes, but the issue of mud and kissing gates and broken gates and rivers that are flooding, all these kinds of things, really we need to be able to have a project where you can map a problem, but then when that problem is being solved, someone else can say it's fixed now, and so lift that problem back off again. We in our project haven't like solved that. That's not what we set out to do, we actually think that should be a shared project between a wide range of organisations. So even if you're not interested in slowways, if you're working with the National Trust, or if you're a public rights-of-way officer, or you're doing a project with Sustrans or whoever, then I think that anyone should be able to take those problems on and off the map, similar to the Waze app, if you've ever seen that for driving. So we're not going to fix that problem completely, but we're going to do what we can. Barbara says, how can you find your local group? Will there be a website? There aren't formal local slowways groups. You can form an informal slowways group if you want, or you can get involved with a group that's formally organised that's going to help. So on our website, we're going to list about 800 to 1,000 groups, and you could reach out to them. But those groups are, say, Ramblers groups or University of the Third Age groups or an outdoors group that have said that they can help check the slowways, and they may be an open group that you can join. So we will list those in advance, but we're not organising any groups from like our central team. Malcolm says, if you have a density of pockets, such as London, how do you communicate lower density areas we could travel to? So Slowways does a very good job at creating an intertown and intercity network that's between the central places in those towns and cities. It's not a suburban network. So while in London there are actually about 50 locations, places like Camden, Ealing Broadway and Southall, Heathrow, that are in the network, a lot of the villages and suburban areas aren't picked up. So same in places like Manchester, where I think there's about 20 nodes for the main urban centres, but the project isn't so good from the data we've got on dealing with suburban areas. So like I say, about 80% of GB population is included within that network within a kilometre or so. But I think a further project is needed to look at either a city or a national park or like a regional level. Having said all that, I think when we're thinking about moving around within cities, you know, Google Maps, City Mapper, there are tools that are very good at doing that job already. What Slowways does that different is get us between those places, between cities. M. Martin says, is it possible to add a seasonal alert indicator to the grade table to warn the likely significant changes caused by weather and flooding and deep mud? I'm writing that down as an idea. I think that my gut feeling is that a lot of people will probably know that the weather, what time of year it is, and the likelihood of those sort of problems. But it's an interesting point that we'll reflect on. Thank you very much. Helen says, a good project for older scouts to help with, question mark. Contacting local scout groups in the thin areas could be a good approach. Let me know if I can help. Helen, yes, please. We'd love to have lots of scouts and Duke of Edinburgh Award and John Muir Award, young people out helping with this. That'd be absolutely fantastic. An anonymous attendee, I'm going to answer just like 5 more questions and then round up. Thanks to everyone who's sort of stuck with us. Still got nearly 800 people on the webinar, which is fantastic. Given that many existing footpaths are now churned up due to extra walkers, COVID times, how can you help get footpaths maintained? Our county now only has 1 footpath officer, so not a lot of maintenance now. So, like I said before, Slowways is not going to be focused on paths or path maintenance. It's about routes. But I think where we can help is that, you know, during the project, we had so many volunteers creating routes, and they realized that actually they wanted to visit another part of the country that they hadn't, you know, visited before. You know, we've all seen these images on top of Snowdon, where we've seen massive honeypot effect of loads of people mounding on top of each other because they haven't thought or known maybe somewhere else that they could potentially go to. So I genuinely believe that Slowways will maybe help to take pressure off some existing footpaths, because we'll start discovering new or alternative paths that other people, you know, hadn't otherwise been thinking about. And I think there are ways in which we can help to surface those paths as well. Mary, I think I answered that question already. Judith, there has been a lot of unacceptable funny comments from somebody called Jackson on the chat. Please, can you get him removed? Well, I'm very sorry to hear about that, and I'm on my own, and so I'm able to handle that. So I apologise, but hopefully everyone can accept my apology and frown at Jack. And Jack, if you can start being polite and maybe leave, please. We've got just a couple more minutes to go. Eddie, I'm interested to know how this initiative would dovetail with local highway authorities, public rights-of-way access teams on practicalities, e.g. how you envisage waymarking being managed, how legal status of different elements of the route is verified, how issues on routes will be dealt with, such as obstructions and safety issues. So firstly, we don't have any near-term plans around waymarking, although it would be, I think, be a fantastic thing if we had a national network of walking routes that was properly signed, so it's easy for people to get around, but in a way that was sympathetic to the environment. But we're not there yet. Legal status, all the routes that have been designed so far have used public rights of way already. The opportunity to some extent, I think, is to think about new permissive footpaths and other routes that could be used in the future, but they use accessible and, well, sorry, not accessible, they use public rights of way. That partially answers that question in the time available. In terms of issues on routes, I think I've also dealt with that as well, but go back to the point that slowways is about routes, not paths. So I hope that distinction is clear. Who knows where things will evolve to, but that's not where we are now. Ben says, how will you ensure that all the walks are covered? Some will be more popular than others. We'll get them all covered because we don't expect to verify all and survey all the routes in the first week. You know, this is a multi-year project that will take some time. And even if I have to go and walk the hardest, most distant places, I can, but and I'd enjoy doing that. But I just know there'll be people on this Zoom who will want to hunt out maybe some of those most challenging routes. So I feel I feel okay about that. Right, I think that's enough for now. I'm going to apologise about this guy who's been really rude on the chat. I really apologise for that, and hope that you managed to sort of mask your eyes. I'm sorry that they weren't ejected, but like I say, I'm on my own here, and I wasn't able to deal with that. If you have questions in the chat question thing, we will try and answer those that haven't been answered on the Q&A in the sort of coming weeks. Please do sign up to the newsletter if you've not already done that, so we can keep you updated about when it all goes live. Please use the Slowways hashtag to let people know about routes and walks. But anyway, I hope you found that all very interesting. There's another one of these at 7 p.m. this evening if you want to sort of come again. But I'm just so delighted that you have joined me for this sort of lunchtime talk. And I very much hope to see you in person, or a photograph of you, or hear about you enjoying one of the Slowways when we finally get outdoors later in the year. Thanks very much. I'll see you all another time. Bye-bye.